It's Wednesday, October 13. This is the news on PBCJ. I'm Carol Francis. The COVID-19 pandemic has dealt a body blow to Jamaica's economy, but the government has announced some much-needed relief. Some 350,000 Jamaicans will soon benefit from direct government grants totaling nearly $4 billion. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark says the cash injection forms part of the first supplementary estimates which were passed in the lower house of Parliament on Tuesday.
The CARE program will provide a one-off grant of $10,000 to all employees who are on the PAYE system and who earn less than or equal to $15,000 a week gross or $60,000 per month gross. $10,000 will also, Madam Speaker, to all self-employed persons whose statutory income is less than or equal to $60,000 per month equivalent.
The finance minister says this forms part of the government's efforts to ease the burden on the most vulnerable in the society. Tens of thousands of NIS pensioners also stand to receive additional relief.
Madam Speaker, for anyone in receipt of an NIS pension being paid at a rate of $10,000 a month or less, the CARE program will provide an automatic one-off $10,000 grant. There are about 57,000 pensioners in this category, Madam Speaker. The total cost of this grant is expected to be approximately $570 million, and it will be implemented by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security in coordination with the Ministry of Finance and Public Service. Again, there's no need to apply. This is an automatic payment through the CARE program to this category of Jamaican citizens.
Just about 120,000 students were unaccounted for by the Education Ministry at the end of the last school year. Acting Chief Education Officer in the Education Ministry, Dr. Trough, and Permanent Secretary, Dr. Grace McLean, sat down in the PAAC and explained how the ministry is planning to address the situation. We get more from Simone Absalom Gale.
The yard-to-yard Finding the Child initiative is set to cost about $95 million. Acting Permanent Secretary in the Education Ministry, Dr. Grace McLean, says that the framework is being planned and when completed, it should account for those out of school and complement other intervention programs.
In terms of the completion of the framework document to guide this implementation, and a part of the questions that we will ask the parents would be what would be preventing these children from coming to school. And based on the responses they provide and the categories they fall in, whether they are students on path or whatever other category, we will try to analyze the data to see how best the support can be provided. Whether it is, of course, those that are within our control. For example, if we can source additional tablets through the OYOD program or through the One Laptop Per Child initiative, or whether these students are on path and can benefit from support from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security and other entities. And those that do not fall into these categories, then we will make representation internally to see how best we can support those students through the schools.
Dr. McLean says the initiative is set to begin mid-November.
We will, of course, through our minister, be sending the request for you to provide us with the names of some young people to fit the profile that we will be using along with the guidance counselors and social workers to go into the communities. We will be training these young people. There is a customer service module that the Heart Trust NTA has that we will have them trained for a couple of days and ensure that they receive the appropriate guidance and assessment, and then they will work through the schools in terms of the school being the base and going out into the communities in and around. Of course, they will be provided with the necessary support in terms of data collection. We are in the process of creating an app that will allow us to have the information being readily available for analysis purposes. So it's a lot of preparatory work to be done, sir.
Acting Chief Education Officer in the Education Ministry, Dr. Trough, has been crunching the data that is being used to plan the initiative. She explains to PAAC member Lisa Hanna how it's being used by her team.
I'm really concerned. So the entire school enrollment population should be what,
414,000 approximately.
And 120,000 of that 413,000 were unaccounted for last school year.
Yes, and we have seen a decline in that since the start of this new year.
A decline in the numbers that were unaccounted for?
Dr. Trough says of the 120,000 students who missed classes in the last school term, 45,000 students have since been located.
And out of that, the team was able to re-engage, communicate, and support in a targeted way 25,000 of those students. So we were able to identify the student, track them, engage with them, finding out what was happening, and we were able to see 25,000 of those students participating in summer school, and the family support was provided. So those were some of the preliminary activities that went into preparing for the school year.
According to Dr. Trough, most of the students who are unaccounted for are registered in schools in Region 1, the Kingston and St. Andrew area. For the news on PBCJ, I'm Simone Absalom Gale.
The Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act has been passed once again in the House of Representatives. The lower house gave the nod to the bill in July, but the Senate sent it back with a number of amendments. Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, Olivia Babs-Grange, says some of the amendments were substantial.
Clause 4 imposes a duty on every employer and head of institution to issue a policy statement. The policy statement is to be issued in writing and will, among other things, detail the protection of workers and students in the business or institution from sexual harassment. There was concern with this requirement being complied with by micro-employers and those individuals engaged in work in domestic spaces. This obligation was felt to be too onerous for these employers, but not for bigger businesses. To cure the concern, it was agreed that the clause be amended by giving the minister power to acknowledge those employment circumstances where use of the policy framework document would not be appropriate.
The Sexual Harassment Bill contains provisions for dealing with sexual harassment in a number of places, including the workplace, schools, correctional institutions, places of safety, and medical facilities.
Clause 8 prescribes that a confidential register be maintained at places of employment and institutions. The clause goes further to stipulate the requisite information that such a register must contain in relation to any alleged claim of sexual harassment. On review, it was highlighted that the clause did not allow for findings of any sexual harassment claim to form part of the register, especially in instances where internal dispute mechanisms would have been employed and exhausted.
Once passed, institutions are required to have a sexual harassment policy statement in place within 12 months of its implementation. At this time, we bring you up to speed with the latest financial market news in this quick business report with Gabriel Thompson.
In foreign exchange trading for Tuesday, October 12, the US dollar sold for an average $151.23. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $121.49. The pound sterling traded for $206.19, and the euro sold for an average $175.32. In Tuesday's trading session, the JSE Combined Index declined by 1,195 points to close at over 408,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 91 stocks, of which 34 advanced, 40 declined, and 17 traded firm. The Junior Market Index advanced by 14 points to close at over 3,000 units. Stocks advanced for Access Financial Services Limited, Berger Paints Jamaica Limited, and Blue Power Group Limited. Stocks declined for 1834 Investments Limited, AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited, and Barita Investments Limited. Trading firm were 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, CAC 2000 9.5% preference shares, and Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances Limited. Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial was the volume leader with over 1.5 million units, followed by Jamaican Teas Limited with over 1.2 million units, and Wigton Wind Farm Limited ordinary shares with over 1.2 million units. In market data for oil, prices edged down on Wednesday on concerns that oil demand growth will fall as major economies suffer through inflation and supply chain issues, though surging prices for power generation fuels such as coal and natural gas limited losses. Brent crude futures fell 24 cents to $83.18 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 23 cents to $80.41 a barrel. And on that note, we close this Wednesday edition of the Business Report Inside the News on PBCJ. I'm Gabrielle Thompson. Pleasant viewing.
A good rule for life is moderation. Taken to extremes, the consumption of alcohol can have several debilitating effects on the body, including organ damage and failure. In today's Living Healthy report, Dr. Heather Lawson-Myers looks at the ways alcohol can affect our dental health.
Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. Hi, I'm HD and welcome to HD's Jazz. Today we're talking about Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Alcohol. $1655. That's the date of the beginning of the infamous journey of this southernmost city, Port Royal in Jamaica. It was a home of many pirates. Blackbeard, Henry Morgan, and the Buccaneers, they had lots of wherewithal to consume lots and lots of alcohol. Consuming alcohol isn't a problem. However, anything that is abused is going to be injurious to your body. The first thing you need to know about alcohol, it's a drying agent, which is a good thing in certain circumstances, but you don't want your mouth to be dry. The saliva is there so that it can flush and help to clean your mouth naturally. So even mouthwash, check the label. If it says alcohol, find one that does not have an alcohol content. The other thing is, you are very 6 times more susceptible to oral cancer if you consume copious amounts of alcohol. You're very prone to cancer in the mouth and the throat. Alcohol prevents you from thinking clearly. It affects your judgment. And so if you are under the affluence of alcohol, chances are you're more likely to be in a motor vehicle accident or in a fight because you're not using good judgment. It doesn't matter what the cause of trauma is. Trauma to your mouth can injure your teeth, your jaws, or a combination thereof. So remember, drink responsibly. Reduce your risk of dental decay, gum disease, and most importantly, oral cancer. So as we leave this wicked city of Port Royal, whether it's straight or on the rocks, you have to be mindful of your alcohol intake. Listen, catch us next time on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. Catch you later on HD's Jazz.
In regional news, there has been a decline in the number of fraud attempts in Barbados. This according to new research to be released by the country's Financial Intelligence Unit. More from Barbados today.
Acting Inspector Sonia Thompson of the Royal Barbados Police Force Financial Crimes Investigations Unit said police have seen a reduction in the number of reports of fraud since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. She said in many instances, it was discovered that trusted family members were the ones carrying out the fraud using their loved ones' bank cards or forging their signatures.
Most of the fraud that we are seeing relate a lot to ATM withdrawals. And sometimes when persons come in and then they make that report, we get the footage and everything to support it. And when we show them the footage, it's a case where they decide, oh, I'm not going to prosecute anymore. It's a family member, it's someone I know. So those are one of the things that we've been seeing quite a lot. And prior, we were seeing in terms of documents, fraudulent documents and stuff, but I know we've been doing quite a bit of training with some of the institutions, so we're not seeing those fraudulent documents as much as we were seeing them earlier in the year.
According to the research by the Financial Intelligence Unit, just over 100 fraud attempts were made between March 2019 and February 2021 at financial institutions, valuing more than $6 million. The unit's director, Cook Tate, gave a sneak peek into some of the findings, which is to be made public in a matter of days.
What we found was interesting because we identified 65 matters actually of a value of $4.8 million relating to attempts to gain money through fraud. And we found that 22 of those 65 matters were deemed to be successful. In fact, the dollar value behind that amount was Barbados $477,000. All right. In the second period, and this is the actual COVID context that we're talking about, we identified 47 attempts at defrauding the institution, and the dollar value was $1.4 million, with 8 of those attempts being regarded as successful. Right? So for us, the total attempts, the total dollar value of fraud over those 2 periods was $6.2 million, while the successful attempts total just under $600,000, or approximately 10% of the overall value. Now, that told us that for us in Barbados, the appetite for fraud, let us say, was perhaps not as high as in other countries, because we have seen a decrease in actual fraudulent attempts and so on.
Over in the Bahamas, Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Michael Darville has responded to calls for the government to consider tighter COVID-19 restrictions. Jasmine Brown reports.
The new health minister says the fact of the matter is Dr. Sands' comments are not falling on deaf ears, as he says the Davis administration will do what it must to clamp down on those COVID-19 cases.
We feel at this particular time we are okay to the point that we do not need to bring restrictions back to where they are. But I can say this much, we're watching it extremely closely, and in the event that we feel that we need to execute more measures, we will.
The Bahamas has been struggling with an unprecedented surge in COVID-19 cases, hospitalizations, and deaths during the third wave. Over the weekend, the country recorded yet another grim milestone, pushing the country's COVID-19 death toll to over 600. The Davis administration has promised to end the state of emergency when it expires next month. Darville says that is still the plan.
Plans are on the way to move the whole concept of the competent authority back to where it belongs at the Ministry of Health. We believe that we can handle measures without the emergency orders, and we will be laying regulations very shortly when we begin to go back to Parliament.
The Health and Wellness Minister added what also needs to happen is heightened surveillance.
That is something the Minister of National Security and myself is looking very closely at, because, you know, you release restrictions and you expect people to function and to abide by the public health measures. And when we look, people are doing what they want to do.
On Friday, the former health minister called for the government to consider drastic restrictions. Even though cases have dropped, Dr. Sands pointed out that hospitals remain overwhelmed and COVID-19 infections are continuing at an unprecedented rate.
I'm listening to what the former minister is saying, and we're taking it into consideration. The numbers are going down, but we do have a problem at the tertiary healthcare level, because we feel that individuals who are positive may be coming to the institution a little bit too late, and we need to try to initiate therapies before they begin to decompensate and start to have severe respiratory symptoms.
Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
A national holiday is among the observances the Santa Rosa First Peoples community is requesting as a symbol to honor indigenous people in Trinidad and Tobago. Kimberly D'Souza tells us more.
And I want to make a call, a public call to the Prime Minister to reconsider a day of recognition to a national public holiday for First Peoples.
Chief of the Santa Rosa First Peoples community, Ricardo Barath Hernandez, said more action is needed to advance the cause of indigenous people in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2017, a one-off holiday was granted on October 13th, and on the heels of U.S. President Joe Biden's proclamation that October 11th is Indigenous Peoples Day, Mr. Hernandez reissued the call for an annual holiday locally. Mr. Hernandez said First People should be considered a unique sector of the population who can trace their roots to those who existed before the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492.
We seek to be in the circle where every creed and race find an equal place. We do not ask to be above anybody. As the first linked in this rainbow population, we appeal for the respect and the honor of our First Peoples.
Minister of Sport and Community Development, Shamfa Kojo, said the gathering represents the strength and resilience of the First Peoples.
And today's celebration reminds us of the First People being our first line of defense, those who stand up for who we are and set the pace as it relates to our values and our culture and our heritage. And I think that this is something we should all be proud of.
Mr. Hernandez is also calling for assistance to partially fund a monument and support in building a heritage village to honor their ancestors. Kimberly D'Souza, TTT News.
And in sports, we are on the track with athletics. World Athletics announced its ratification of Jamaica's world record in the women's 4x100 meters at the World Under-20 Championships in Nairobi, Kenya in August. The quartet of Serena Cole, Tina Clayton, Carisha Hill, and Tia Clayton clocked 42.94 seconds to erase the previous World Under-20 record of 43.27 seconds set by Germany in 2017. The time was also a World Under-18 best and faster than the previous national Under-20 record of 43.62 set by an Edwin Allen team at the Penn Relays in 2019. And just before we go, a quick weather update. Jamaicans are urged to prepare for unstable weather conditions on Wednesday and Thursday. The Meteorological Service is reporting that a broad trough across the Western Caribbean is interacting with a slow-moving tropical wave currently across Hispaniola. Satellite imagery indicates that these systems are producing a large area of cloudiness with showers and thunderstorms across the Central Caribbean. Current projections are for the tropical wave to slowly move across Jamaica in the next 48 hours. Fishers on the Keys and Banks are advised to exercise caution as sea conditions will deteriorate in the vicinity of thunderstorms, especially off the south coast. And that's our package. Join us again tomorrow, same time, same place, for more news and sports right here on PBCJ, the People's Station.